Alexandrius knew there was a problem from a very early age. Draped in ball gowns and toted around parties, the child was a blessing bestowed upon a prestigious Roman family. Carried on the backs of gods, Alexandrius always had a creeping suspicion that one day the people he honored and were born into, would slowly fade away once they realized that something was different about the dear child that they revered. Born of both mortal and goddess, Alexandrius was a being that existed in both worlds. They were able to rise up to the clouds with their mother, yet also see the salty banks of the river where their father showed them the workers who painstakingly reaped the benefits of fish that swam to the shore, only to be served on platters at the parties where Alexandrius never felt comfortable. As a child, they would put on their father's armor and ask when they would have the opportunity to track an animal until attack. However, as an adolescent, they found a natural skill in weaving the gold stems that grew from the heavenly bushes of the world above. From mock violence to creation, Alexandrius had a natural skill that no being, godly or otherwise, could deny, except for one ancient mortal. The high priest stood on the mountain that nearly touched the clouds of the heavenly land, looking up to monitor that all was stable from the sky, and looking down to ensure that no mortal was causing mayhem. On their ninth celebration of life, the high priest cast his eyes upon Alexandrius with a glare the child had never experienced before. They were running through the mountainous fields, dulled spear in hand, but rather than acting as though they were on the hunt, Alexandrius was dancing and singing. "Aye, child," the booming voice cried down to Alexandrius, who looked up in fear, knowing that they were having the time of their young life, but the chastising was difficult to deny in the priest's tone of voice. "Where do you think you're off to, dancing with glee? Don't you know what the world has set out for you?" Alexandrius shook their head, unable to wrap their mind around that question from an authority figure. "You must figure out who you are, what your place in this world is, and you mustn't wait until it's too late." The concept of these things had no place in the mind of this young child. Upon Alexandrius' 15th year of life, where young men were sent to hunt and young women were sent to take to the loom, Alexandrius found themselves confused by the prospect of picking which world they would step into. Alexandrius' father questioned, "Where is the sphere you played with for all those years? Why don't you go fetch it, and we'll give you a real tip to slay the antelope running amok in the forest?" Alexandrius' mother questioned, "Why don't you get comfortable with me and the ladies today? We'll have biscuits and talk over better days, the old times." The intensity of their father scared Alexandrius, demanding blood and retribution of the animals that encroach upon their land. The wistful nostalgia that Alexandrius' mother held in her tone scared the child too. How could she reminisce on the history of God striking down humans? Both of their outlooks muddied Alexandrius' understanding of the world, but the parents looked at their child as a lackadaisical kid who was simply too lazy to make a decision that would determine their life. It was not laziness nor fear that made Alexandrius unable to determine which path to take at a young age. They didn't know quite what it was, but as they sat on the mountainside throwing stones, they recalled their previous birthday when the high priest confronted them. "Figure out who you are," rang in his ears. Their ears. I'm sorry, I'm reading off the fly. And Alexandrius took to the mountain to ask the high priest for advice. As Alexandrius approached, the prudent priest turned to the teen in surprise. "I suppose you're here because you don't know which path to take. Which will it be? The one with power and victory, or comfort and bliss?" Alexandrius looked to their sandaled feet, confused to which could possibly be better. "You can't dance through life. You must choose. Valor and triumph, relaxation and necessity. Both are admirable and necessary." Their sandals shuffled in the dirt, and the high priest grew frustrated in the child's lack of response. "You must choose. Make your father proud or your mother. It will be one or the other." Alexandria simply could not confront what the world would look like with the hunt, nor could they fathom the boredom they would face if they were kept to the spacious sewing rooms of heaven. They looked at the priest, brow furrowed and chin trembling, only to be scolded once more. "Ha, I guess you don't know who you are. Disgrace upon your family, your entire race, though I suppose you are one of one." The sneer the priest gave the child was all they needed. A lifetime of being told what to do, harsh tones, and expectations set far beyond their own dreams. It all amounted to Alexandrius running from the mountaintop, up to the edges of heaven to pick at the gold bushes before returning to the banks of the riverbed. Quickly and passionately, Alexandrius weaved a basket wider than any human or god's body, running past the fishermen whose hunched backs were breaking from grasping at their fishing lines. It was then, past the pushing and shoving, that Alexandrius took to the sky with powers. They held the golden basket in their hands, swooped down to the entrance of where the river met the sea, and were met suddenly by a sight of onlookers. Their mother and father were shocked, looking down at the commotion, fearing their baby had been taken by the current. Alexandrius emerged from the ocean, drenched in water and salt, but more importantly, with a golden basket full of fish. They floated above all, even the high priest, passing fish to the masses with no brutality necessary. I don't know who I am, they cried, victorious yet relaxed in their realization. But I am not like you. Alexandrius floated back to the earth, facing their mother and father when their feet hit the ground. I am me. I am victorious, not violent. I am relaxed. I am not bored. I do not need to know who I am to be assured.
She was 12 when her membership card came in the mail. Welcome to the Dead Mothers Club was written in thick red letters across the front of the envelope. It was postmarked for the day she died. Dylan knew it was coming, having heard about the club from one of her teammates on her soccer team, whose mother passed away from cancer 2 years prior. The card, however, was not visible to non-members. When Dylan's teammate tried showing it off, everyone thought she was lying. But as her mother grew sicker, Dylan wondered if her own card would come in the mail. The engraved inscription included her mother's name, her own name, the membership activation date, or MAD, and a phone number for customer service. 12 was far too young to carry the weight. Literally, the card came in at a ridiculous 10 pounds of the membership, so she avoided it. Life went on. She played soccer through high school, graduated with honors, went on to college, and began growing into a young woman who was free to move about the world how she saw fit. On that journey, she met Frances, a barista at a coffee shop that was kitty corner to her apartment complex. When she saw her, she couldn't believe her eyes. Frances, in the midst of making drinks and slinging pastries, had her Dead Mothers Club membership card strapped to her back. It occurred to her all this time, the last 8 years of her life, she never once paid attention or noticed if anyone else around her carried that weight on them. Her first time at the shop, Dylan kept quiet, but also kept her eyes on Frances to watch the way she moved around, wondering how she didn't get tired with 10 extra pounds strapped to her back. The second meeting, she warmed up a little and said hello and asked how Frances was doing. The third meeting, she asked her about her weekend, and Frances yapped on and on about her plans. By the fourth meeting, Frances had Dylan's drink ready before she could even walk in the door, and the word vomit took over in a way that she couldn't hold back. "Why are you wearing that on your back?" she screamed at Frances, more of an accusation rather than a question. Frances was taken aback initially, but the fact that Dylan could see it meant that she knew what it was like to get that card in the mail, and Frances found herself sympathizing with Dylan. "Go and have a seat over there. I can take a break in 15 and we can talk." The other patrons in the coffee shop watched the interaction, and most were puzzled, but there were a few who also saw the card strapped to Frances's back. So they also somewhat understood Dylan's emotional outburst. By the time Frances came over, the initial shock of her behavior washed away, and she couldn't help but profusely apologize when Frances sat down with her, placing an almond croissant in front of Dylan, as if it were a peace offering. "Where's yours?" The question was simple enough, and Frances didn't need to elaborate for Dylan to know what she was talking about. With a shrug, Dylan stared at the almond slivers on the pastry, needing anything but Frances to focus on. "In a box somewhere," was her final admission. "I got mine when I was 8. I didn't know what to do with it at first, so I left it in a box too. I think if I had gotten it when I was older, I may have felt more attached to it. But I was just a little girl, you know? And then something changed when I was a senior in high school. I suddenly remembered, or finally acknowledged, that she was gone. She wouldn't see me graduate, wouldn't be there for any of my accomplishments. would miss out on all the small, stupid things I will do and won't be able to scold me for it. I realized that I could either keep her in that box and have these conscious reoccurrences of her passing and absence from my life, or I could have her with me every day. Dylan's fingers traced the rim of her cup as she listened, molding over her own experiences of denial and anger and depression due to her mother's passing, and she wondered why the membership card didn't come with a manual or a set of instructions to know how to deal with it. Doesn't it get heavy? She asked her finally. And Frances laughed. Sometimes it feels like 10 pounds. Other times it feels like 100. And there are some days where I don't notice it at all. Either way, I think it's a gift. We have to sacrifice a piece of ourselves, our love, our comfort, to be a part of this community, club, whatever you want to call it. But I get to carry her with me every day. And it's up to you, to all of us, to decide how we want to bring it along with us. I don't want to hide my membership, but I understand why some people do. When Dylan returned home, carrying the almond croissant and her half-consumed drink, she pulled the membership card out of a shoebox in the back of her closet and sat in front of her full-length mirror. With the card in her hand, she began snacking on the croissant and talked at length about all the experiences and feelings and milestones that her mother missed out on in the last 8 years.